Well, good evening to all of you, and especially those who are visiting with our congregation this evening. Glad to see you and to receive encouragement from you and to have you study and worship with us. It's always a blessing to meet God's people from different places and anyone who is seeking Him. You know, tonight's lesson is going to be a little bit different in that the introduction and the setup might be a little bit longer than what you're used to. It's just a little bit different. That's the nature of the thing tonight. And then some of the main points that we'll share later are going to be a little bit more general and survey in nature. But as we go through, you'll see why we're trying to do it that way. It's not so much that you're trying to be taught something very specific and new tonight, or that I'm trying to persuade you of maybe something specific. I want you to have, if you don't have this, a shift in your thinking, a way of your outlook on the world. And that's actually what I want to study and think about with you this evening. That the Bible explains your world. Let me go ahead and tell you my specific target audience for this sermon, and then I'd like for us to consider a little bit why I'm doing it. I want to be very clear in this. Like with a lot of sermons, I would hope that everyone would get something from it and would see some principles and some ideas that you can take and, all right, I need to work on that, or I need to think about that, or I need to share that in a special way. This lesson is specifically, though, for our college students or for those who are about to go into the world of the university or the college, the public or private education system. So if you are a senior in high school coming into this next year, or if you're about to enter and enroll in a college or university later this year, or if you're anywhere in that bracket, this is specifically for you, although, like I said, I hope others can gain from it. And I would hope, too, that if you find something useful in this, that you might share the link and send it to that young person in your life to maybe encourage them. The Bible explains your world. And the reason I say that is there are two extremes of mindsets when it comes to what college does to your spiritual state. And I want to start by thinking about that for a moment. There's one extreme that looks at college and university professors and the entire experience of going through higher ed with the same kind of viewpoint as if you were marching to a spiritual guillotine. That is, we have this mindset that it's just a world where atheists are scheming together in smoke-filled rooms about how they can corrupt the minds of the young once they step on campus. On the other extreme, you've got sometimes parents and young people and families, and they're all concerned about getting the right roommates and making sure they've got the clothes for the college year to start, and they've picked out their dorm or their apartment and all these other things, and they never, ever give a thought to spiritual things. The group of the Lord's people in that area that they can put roots down. Are there people close to them of the Lord's family that can be close to them and encourage them and be there for them when they do meet real spiritual challenges? These are two extremes, and like so often, the truth is somewhere there in the middle. While it's not true that most universities and professors are scheming and thinking how they can corrupt your mind and convert you to an atheist, by the way, I've been in those faculty meetings. I've been in those settings. I've been on the other side. And like most jobs, most occupations, the vast majority are serious professionals trying to do their work. But there are some. There are those out there that will abuse the platform that they've been given. And there will be courses where even you might not have a professor or an instructor that is trying to convert you to an atheistic or agnostic worldview, but the material itself, whether in the sciences or in some of the humanities or some of the historical courses you might take, or a religion or world religions 101, you will encounter material there that, if not careful, it will undermine your faith. Caricatures are there for a reason because there's a kernel of truth in them. And I could start to list off people that I know whose faith was either undermined immediately and fatally in their college years, or as the years went by, tracing back to that time. So that's something where we need to have a balanced view of that. And here's the approach I'm taking with the lesson and our considerations this evening. on one side of things, in so many of the sciences and the humanities, if you want to get anywhere in the academic world today, which means these are our teachers, you have to have the view where I will approach the subject. This is what the world says. You've got to approach your subject without God in the equation. Now, you can have your own little personal faith off to the side, but if you're going to be an intellectual and academic adult in the sciences, like in geology or in biology or in history or in psychology, you got to leave that religious stuff at the door, and you need to approach it like God is not part of the equation. And the belief then is, if you do that, the world of knowledge objectively will be open to you. And that then will explain everything that you see in the world. It will explain the biological world, evolution. It will explain the world of history, the mechanics by which people make decisions and generals change the course of a civilization, and where a disease might wipe through and change how things are done. So the effort is we take God out of the equation and now explain everything else through that lens. The Bible, however, offers an explanation about this world, about your place in it, and about where you're going. And although it is certainly not the case that the Bible sets out to give us all sorts of geological or astronomical kind of information, the Bible is not a history book. It's not about economics in ancient times. The Bible doesn't set out to say and give the final word on all of these different things, but for sure, the big questions of life, the big things that really the university is trying to teach you to investigate, the Bible has the answers and explains that for you. And so it's with that in mind that I want to approach our study this evening. Maybe the most simple, vivid way of putting it would be something that I've experienced different times. And I hope you know where I'm coming from here. Not in a haughty or arrogant way, but this is just matter of fact. You sit there in a class and you're listening to this world-renowned biologist teaching you through all these things, and you listen and you take them seriously. They've earned it. But you also kind of think in the back of your mind, I learned in Sunday school where this world came from. And she doesn't know where the world came from. And you think to yourself, not that I'm on a par with them and what they've earned, what they've become and worked to be, but on the central thing about where the world came from. Little old ignorant me knows that. A child knows that answer. And so that's the approach I'm trying to take is, don't try to argue with people and discredit those in authority positions. Don't try to be a know-it-all, but have your head on straight and be a person of faith and enter into your study, enter into your college career if you do that with the mindset of, I can boldly go into this. And I don't have to be afraid of a subject. I don't have to be afraid of what I'll find. I don't have to be afraid if I'm going to be a doctor or a geologist or a physicist or a radiologist or a historian. I don't have to be afraid to dig in, afraid of what I'm going to find and afraid of what that's going to do to my faith. Truth is truth. It never suffers scrutiny. Get in there. Get into that discipline. Get into that field. Become the best in the world at that if that's what your God-given talents are. And use that for His glory. And you can approach that from a standpoint of faith because the Bible explains your world. I want to go through just a few questions, a few areas in which we investigate and seek and look for knowledge, just simply to make the point that the Bible gives the big answers, the important ones to that. Let's just start with the one I've alluded to already, on origins. How did this world come to be? How did you come to be? How did the universe begin? Is it a matter of, is energy eternal? Is it forever? Did it ever have a beginning? How did that start? Is it the Big Bang or the big implosion or whatever the latest trend is? Is that how it began? Did you and I truly evolve from single-cell organisms? Did you and I really develop systems like the central nervous system, like the digestive system? Did we develop consciousness and emotions and all of these higher order thinking just because we have evolved all of these systems? The Bible tells you where you come from. what strikes me especially about the Old Testament and the way it's written is there is a stateliness and an elegant grandeur and the simplicity through which it lays out the most profound of information and of propositions. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. By all means, learn all you can from those who have investigated and studied and performed experiments, but never let anyone shake you from the central belief that explains your world in ways that other worldviews and explanations cannot. You take so many of those parts of our body, for example, even a single cell, with all of its organelles and all of the material moving in and out, the chemical processes. All of those things are interlocked and need each other to be performed, and that kind of reducibility, that kind of complexity cannot be something that just evolved over a process, but to have an intelligent, all-knowing Creator who spoke it into being and oversees this world, that has a lot of value in explaining what we see and how we experience the world. Turn over also, if you would, to Acts chapter 17. Look in Acts 17 and see what the Apostle Paul says to those that like to think about where the world began and their place in it. In Acts 17, as Paul is talking to the Athenians, he says in verse 24, God who made the world and everything in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is He worshipped with men's hands as though He needed anything, since He gives to all life, breath, and all things. If you begin to examine the story of humanity, we are creatures. Yes, I use that term very intentionally, creatures. Not animals, not just to speak, we are creatures made by a Creator who are constantly making up stories and thinking of explanations for how we came to be. And whatever this generation's popular or by consensus scientific explanation of how the universe came to be, I can only give you one guarantee. If the world lasts long enough, that will be cast aside, it will be mocked by future generations, and something new will be brought in. But here's a truth that works, a truth that endures. That God made the world and all that is in it, and He is Lord of heaven and earth. And there comes a point where my faith must be of the sort. I listen, I hear, I scrutinize what people say, but there comes a point where I have my convictions, I use my God-given mind to come to them, and I will not move from that conviction. That's not to be negotiated. And if we go into discussions with that mindset, that's fair because the other person is coming into that discussion with their mind made up. But I have this conviction, and I want then to share the evidence with others, and I need to act as if the information that I hold means something for my life. But I want to think for a moment about history. Is history just a matter of the great man theory where it's just all a bunch of random happenings and interactions, but sometime you get some great larger-than-life figure that moves the needle and changes the course of history? Or you've got others that say, well, that's just a lot of nonsense. It may appear that way, but you don't get 600,000 men marching to Moscow just because one single man wills them to do it. There's a whole force of the natural world and of other movements that are just impel them to go that way, and it could not have been otherwise. There are all sorts of different theories about what history is or what historians do. But the Bible actually tells me, I won't explain everything about history for you, but I'll tell you what history is all about. And we don't have to move away here from Acts 17. Look in verse 26. And He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. By the way, what does that mean? Their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Nations rise and fall in different parts of the world, and they have their moment, they have their era. You saw it in Mesopotamia. thousands of years ago. Greece, Rome, Europe, the United States. Oh, we're moving west, aren't we? Scary. But civilizations have their rise and they have their fall. That's just the way that the world works. Why? Why is that the case? Why do boundaries move? Why do times of reigns and of domination change? God did it so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for Him and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. I cannot put my confidence and my hope, and I cannot take what I'm going to give myself to by way of a great cause in this world to advancing a nation or a city-state or to a people or to a civilization, because they rise and they fall. That is not what my hope and my faith and trust are in. We're to be good citizens, and we're to be noble citizens of whatever state we find ourselves in. The Bible teaches us that. Honor the king. Obey the authorities. Give the adversaries no reason to slander. But there comes a point where I realize that the way that history works is to teach us that no Messiah, no Savior, no final Superman endpoint of all history is working toward any human being except the one God sent. Go over to Galatians chapter 4. Galatians chapter 4. There's a statement about history here, about what history is driving toward, and what history looks back toward. In Galatians 4, as here the apostle is talking about our relationship with the law and why God was slowly, as we might view it, implementing His eternal plan, we get to Galatians 4 and verse 4. But when the fullness of the time had come, there's kind of a play on thoughts here. Just like a pregnancy comes to term and now the child comes, when the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons. We see the rise and fall and the changing courses of history in a way that disorients us and confuses us, so that we learn that we cannot look at life under the sun to find meaning, and yet history points toward one who did come, with historical records bearing out His existence and His death and His burial and His resurrection. And God worked all of human history together so that Messiah would come into the world just when it was right for His plan. And there comes a point where you can sit back and you can watch the documentaries, you can listen to the lecture, you can do the readings. There comes a point where this is all good, we need to get into it. There comes a point where I need to realize and never forget that God was working about salvation through everything that I read and everything that I see and think about. The Bible explains your world. Just a few more areas before we're done this evening. The Bible explains about good and evil in this world. A Holocaust occurs. Extreme Islamism, just like we saw in the news, unfortunately, in Germany this past weekend. Terrible things that we see. This is an evil world that we live in, but it's also full of good. It's also full of noble hearts and of givers and sacrificers and those who run to trouble to save and deliver and rescue and relieve, and not just the destroyers. There's good and evil in this world. The Bible explains that. By the way, what other worldview at all scrapes the surface of explaining good and evil? What does the atheist say about good and evil? Well, where did morality come from? Well, society. Society decides what good and evil is. Well, where does society get that? Well, it's just what, I guess there comes a point where some people pick their head up and realize that enough people agree on this and reject that's what morality is. So you're telling me that, say, in 500 years, if humanity lasts, there might be an age in which they look back on the Holocaust and think that Hitler actually got it right and mankind chose wrong? Well, yeah, I guess we'd have to say that in that age, the morality would say that. So morality is not objective, it's just what humanity decides it is. Sure, I guess you're cornering me into saying that. So you're saying that good and evil is just about chemical processes firing off in our brains, and by accident some consensus emerges that large groups still disagree with. That's morality and good and evil? I guess you've cornered me. That doesn't really explain good and evil. And that doesn't explain why we are so insistent to the point of life and death and going to war and marching and giving ourselves to causes if that's just the accident of our generation and time. This world without God is woefully inadequate and pitiful at explaining what good and evil is. The Bible explains to me about good and evil. Go in your Bibles, please, to James chapter 1. James chapter 1. I want you to read this passage. I don't want to say too much before we get into it. And think in this conversation about what this passage has to say to explain the world that we live in. There is good, there is evil. That's a fact. The Bible explains that as fact. But look in James 1, verse 13. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. The Bible says, so sadly, there is good and there is evil, but God is not to be blamed for the evil. God is not to be blamed for that. He is the source of what is good. And by the way, you would never have ever such a thing as evil in your vocabulary, nor would mankind ever think of evil or act as if anything were evil if there weren't a good God that presented to us what it should be. The vocabulary of good and evil cannot exist without an almighty creator who himself is good and who himself suffers his creation to not be like him. Otherwise, we would never have thought of such a thing as good and evil. We would be much like rocks colliding against each other in a landslide without much personal in it. Consider also what the Apostle John says in 1 John chapter 5. We talked about the good. I know where good comes from, and I see the evil as, it's just the absence of God or the departure from God. But there's more to that story. Look at 1 John chapter 5 and verse 18. We know that whoever is born of God does not sin. But he who has been born of God keeps himself, and the wicked one does not touch him. We know that we are of God, and the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. And we know that the Son of God has come and has given us an understanding, that we may know him who is true. And we are in him who is true, and his Son Jesus Christ. This is the true God and eternal life. Good and evil is to be explained this way. The Bible explains it. The Bible doesn't go to all the ins and outs, but the Bible gives me enough to know there is good because there is a God. And there is evil because our God has given mankind a choice. But there's also evil because there is a wicked one. There is a tempter. For all the reasons that the Bible does not stoop to explain to us in this life, God has allowed such a one as the wicked one to appeal to desires and so entice us so that sin then occurs, according to my choice. And so when the world might look at events in history or atrocities committed or crimes over the weekend in the news, you might look at that and they think, well, if we could just educate enough people or bring enough people out of poverty or have good enough laws or good enough this or that. No, that's a fool's errand. It's good to try and be good in some of those areas, but ultimately that's not going to solve good and evil. The Bible explains your world. Related to this one, but I see it as a different topic, and that is the dread topic of suffering. It's often called the problem of pain, the problem of evil, or the problem of suffering. And it's often the agnostic or the atheist favorite weapon in their arsenal to discredit Christianity, because they say, if there truly is an all-powerful and all-knowing and all-loving God, then He hurts when evil happens, He knows when evil happens, and He could do something about it, but if He lets it go, He is not good, or He's not powerful enough, or He's not loving enough, or He's not knowledgeable enough, so therefore there's not a God, at least the one that you serve. The problem of evil and the problem of suffering, there, Christian, deal with that. How does that explain your world and your experience in it of suffering? We need to spend more time another day, another service, discussing that perhaps, but can I at least say enough now to say a couple of things? And one is the problem of evil, the problem of suffering and pain is a problem. It is a question that you and I have to grapple with. But please, let's never pretend that it's the Christian's problem of evil or of pain and suffering. The world has a problem with it. I don't care what worldview you have. I don't care how you view yourself in the world and all that's in it. I don't care if you believe there's a God or not. You've got a problem with evil and suffering too. Because if you say, well, there is no God, well, how does suffering come? How does a notion of pain and of something to avoid, just like a tree might suffer a blow or a disease, or might have a growth or get lightning struck and falls, we don't view that as, oh, well, that poor, poor tree and its little saplings. What's going to happen? That's the world. That is chemical processes meeting with the physical world, and that's what happens. But we suffer. Where did you get that sensation that matters? That the world cares? That other people should care about you and that you yourself care about your suffering? For the atheist and agnostic, that is a wicked, wicked problem to have to solve and explain. How does the Buddhist, the Jew, how do these other worldviews deal with the problem of suffering and evil? We've all got a problem with it. Every religion, every worldview, you've got to give some kind of explanation about that. But here's how the Bible approaches it. The Bible doesn't solve the problem of evil and suffering for us. It simply does not. Now, it tells us what to do with suffering. It tells us how suffering can make us better, but why did God decide that that's the way to make us better? The Bible doesn't explain that. There's so much about this question the Bible doesn't solve. But there's a difference between solving something and explaining something. I'm sure that someday, by the Lord's grace, on that other side, if He decides to explain some of that to us, what a joy some of that instruction and teaching will be. Do you think heaven is only just about a bunch of songs and worship, as wonderful as that sounds? Could there not be also a lot of instruction and teaching like God has always been? I don't think God will change His colors in heaven. There will be yet further instruction and teaching to give to His people. But can I at least say that there is an explanation for now that tides us over? The problem of suffering and pain is not solved. Let's explain it a little bit. From the Garden of Eden on, mankind suffers until the final restoration. We won't turn there, but I think you remember in Genesis 3, He gave the curse to the serpent. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And so there is a tempter that has set himself against humanity and the seed of woman, those godly people who long for redemption. But he went on to say that Eve would have pain in childbirth, that Adam would work from the sweat of his brow through thorns to bring up crops and to bring up food, that pain and suffering is a part of our existence now. But go over to, if you would, with me to Romans chapter 8. To me, the clearest passage that deals with this question and issue and problem of suffering is Romans chapter 8, because Romans 8 is to me a passage that both takes Genesis 3 and the book of Job and Ecclesiastes, and he introduces them to the cross. And what you get is Romans 8, verse 18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it in hope. Because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. For we were saved in this hope. But hope that is seen is not hope. For why does one still hope for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. Once the Garden of Eden happened, that history cannot be unwritten. God will not go back and undo what you and I decide. And now, given that world, given that reality, God says, I will allow them to suffer so that they will be drawn further and further and closer into my arms. God allows it. He suffers it. He Himself came to share in our problem of suffering so that someday the problem of suffering will be undone in the glorious revealing of the sons of God. And I take it He means, when it is revealed, what you and I shall be. It has not yet revealed what we shall be, but we do know that when He is revealed, we will be like Him. For we shall see Him as He is. And everyone who has this hope in Him purifies himself, just as He is pure. One more. Our world starves for purpose. And especially I see it among young people, roughly 16 to 22, in that range, where you're getting done with the high school career and you're moving on to the world of college and university or trade school or the occupation and beyond. Our world is starving for purpose. Why does a Greta Thunberg, or Thunberg, however you pronounce her name, why does she do what she do? Hunger and thirst and travel by raft and boat and protest and sit and get carried away here and there. Why does she do what she does? She longs and starves for purpose. Why do people march on the streets? Why do people volunteer? Why do people spend night after night after night in a library studying and in a lab, so that someday they can get accepted into the program, so that they can then get the internship, so that they can get accepted into the study group where they can study that disease that's claimed a loved one? Why do we do this? Why do young men and women march off to war to slaughter and butcher each other? Why does a young man commit atrocities and then basically commit death by suicide by police? Because a yearning for purpose. One of the sorriest stories of humanity is that ink has been spilled and blood has been spilled, and we have traveled even outside of this planet, and we've been starving and looking for purpose. When just the most simple country bumpkin, ignorant of all the things the university might offer, he could tell you, I know what my purpose is. Because the Bible explains your world. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether it be good or evil. I have a purpose. I have the eternal God-shaped hole in my soul that longs for Him and seeks Him. And just like you might have water in a plastic container and it's sloshing about, ever looking for a crack or some kind of opening to express itself, there's a longing in my soul that is ever seeking and looking, and it's restless until it finds harbor and peace in God. And please let me tell you, young person, you will forever and always be around people who are starving and looking for that very thing that you hold in your heart, that for many of the young people here was taught you and is the unfeigned faith that dwells in you. Oh, share that with others. Let them see not anxiety or restlessness or complaining or insecurity in your life as a Christian. Let them see the peace that passes understanding. Let them know about Jesus Christ. Ask them, come and see. Come read with me. Can I pray for you? And if they ask further questions and investigate, they have seen your good works and they're seeking the Father who is in heaven. Share that purpose with others. Go with me for a moment to the book of Colossians. I want to look at just a few passages here in the book of Colossians which explain that we find our greatest purpose and cause and fulfillment when we find ourselves in a relationship with Jesus Christ, on His terms, walking with Him each day. In Colossians chapter 1 and verse 27, speaking of God's saints, to them God willed to make known what are the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Everything that all of humanity has always been looking and searching for, and all the different little petty ways that we seek for it, is Christ in you. That's what it's all pointing toward. And the story of mankind is that we find cheap imitations, cheap counterfeits of the real thing to stuff and wad into that Christ-shaped hole in our heart. And it's ever more maddening and vexing the more we try to do that until we surrender and give up that fight and submit ourselves to Christ. And then it makes sense and it explains it. In chapter 2, in verse 8, beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For in Him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in Him, who is the head of all principality and power. 3:1. If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth, for you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with Him in glory. Whatever you do with your life and whatever you aspire to be and whatever you become, take the God-given talents and abilities and mind that God gave you. Find what you're passionate about. Find how you can contribute. And you study and learn from the best, and you work at it, and you use all that God has given you and make the most of those talents that God has given you, and you be the best that God made you to be. But whatever that looks like, whatever that vocation is, make it such that it is Christ who works through you at whatever state, condition, status, relationships that you're in. Christ in you, Christ living in you, Christ within you, Christ on the mind of everyone who thinks of you, Christ in the ear of everyone who hears you, Christ in the eye of everyone who sees you, Christ in you, the hope of glory, not just yours, but those who see and observe and look toward our Father who is in heaven. Ultimately, the Bible explains your world. Perhaps we could also say it is Jesus who explains your world. Jesus is the one who makes possible the second birth, to be born again. Jesus is the one that was the culmination of all the ages and what all the ages look back to. Jesus is the one who came to show us true goodness and to defeat evil. Jesus came to suffer. Jesus came with purpose to explain purpose. Jesus explains your world. And even though you may have doubts from time to time, you may have questions, you will be like me and have things that I cannot answer and give an explanation for. I do know one thing. Jesus explains my world. And He has never led me astray, and He never will. And that's what trust and faith ultimately are about. This evening, we call you that if you want to come to Jesus Christ, not so much that He will explain everything for you and do everything for you and fight everything for you and resist all your struggles for you, but you come to Him ultimately because you need a Savior, because you're a sinner. And He will wash you clean like He has washed so many of us clean. Come to Him this evening with all of your heart and commit your ways and your life in His hands. And if you do that and trust Him enough, you can be buried with Him in baptism. And then you can be raised with Him to walk in newness of life. And you have a spiritual family that will be there always with you, to suffer with you, to have joy with you, to walk with you through life. And above all, you have Almighty God. Come to Him this evening. We're ready and the water's ready. And by all means, heaven is ready. And if we can encourage you, Christian, in any way to strengthen your resolve in your walk with God, that's what we're here for as well. If we can help you in any way, make that known while we stand and sing together.